subscribe for more.
I never imagined a simple dinner could change everything in my life. My name is Gideon Harper, 38, from a quiet suburb in Ohio. I've been married to Lydia Brooks for 12 years. We met at a local bookstore, both reaching for the same rare edition of The Great Gatsby. Sparks flew, and I thought we had something lasting, something unshakable. For the first 5 years, it was. But over time, the laughter faded. Conversations turned into short knots. Touches became rare. I thought it was just stress from work, bills, life piling up. I told myself, patience, Gideon, love has seasons. But tonight, I realized patience had limits. It started subtly. Lydia had always been careful with her appearance, but tonight at dinner, she pulled her hand out of mine as we were walking into the restaurant. I noticed immediately the wedding ring was gone. My chest tightened. At first, I laughed it off. Maybe she didn't like the way it looked with her new dress. But as the evening went on, I couldn't shake the thought that something deeper was happening. Her hand was bare as she sipped her wine, her eyes scanning the menu with an intensity one had never seen before. We sat at a corner table, dim lighting, soft jazz playing in the background. I watched her, trying to understand the new energy between us. There was a lightness, almost a mischief in her gaze. Not at me, but somewhere beyond. I could feel the shift in the room, a tension I hadn't noticed in years. I kept quiet, because arguing here would only be childish. I wanted clarity, not chaos. Then came the appetizer. She excused herself to the restroom, leaving her napkin on the table. And that's when it hit me. Her best friend, Monique Redding, who had joined us for dinner tonight, reached for the napkin playfully, laughing at a joke Lydia had whispered earlier. I watched Monique's fingers brush against the spot where Lydia's ring should have been. An idea formed in my mind slowly, deliberately, like a spark catching dry tinder. I waited until Lydia returned, placing her purse under the table. I smiled, calm, measured, no hint of anger. Conversation resumed, polite laughter, small talk, but underneath, a current of understanding was building. I picked up the wine glass, tilted it slightly, and said, almost casually, "Monique, your hands are bare too. Let me fix that." Monique laughed nervously, unsure what I meant. I reached into my pocket and pulled out Lydia's wedding ring. I could see the surprise in Monique's eyes before she even realized what I was doing. Without hesitation, I slid the ring onto her finger. It fit, perfectly. The room went still, though we were still surrounded by diners and the soft clinking of cutlery. Lydia's face turned pale. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Her hand flew to her mouth, covering it in shock. I leaned back, calm, observing. My pulse was steady, my voice quiet when I finally spoke. "Looks better there, don't you think?" The contrast in the room was sharp. Monique froze, unsure whether to laugh or protest. Lydia's eyes were wide, a mixture of disbelief and something else. Fear, maybe, or regret. I didn't yell. I didn't make a scene. I let the silence speak for me. Dinner continued, but the energy had shifted. I watched Lydia pick at her salad, her usual confident poise gone. I stayed composed, engaging Monique lightly in conversation, letting Lydia feel the absence of control she had once held over the room, over me. Every laugh, every glance I exchanged with Monique was deliberate, subtle, enough to make Lydia aware of the line she had crossed, the indifference she had shown for years. It wasn't revenge in the explosive sense. It wasn't about humiliating her publicly. It was about clarity, a statement. Boundaries exist, respect matters, and actions have consequences. I wanted Lydia to understand, deeply, that I wasn't someone who would endure disregard silently anymore. Later, as we left the restaurant, the night air crisp and cool, Lydia stayed quiet in the back seat. Monique glanced at me with a mix of curiosity and sympathy. She didn't speak, but I sensed she understood the gravity of what had just happened. Lydia, on the other hand, seemed smaller, constrained by her own surprise. Back home, I placed a glass of water on the kitchen counter and watched Lydia move through the room, avoiding my gaze. She said nothing. I didn't ask her to explain. I didn't demand answers. I simply let her sit with the reality she had created. Sometimes clarity doesn't come from confrontation. It comes from observation, from letting someone witness the consequences of their choices in real time. That night, Sleep was elusive, but not uncomfortable. For the first time in months, maybe years, I felt a sense of alignment, a mental clarity. The air in the room was different, lighter, even with Lydia still under the same roof. I realized something profound. My patience had limits, and respect was not negotiable. I had communicated that without raising my voice, without forcing emotion, without begging. And that, in itself, was liberating. Over the next few days, Lydia spoke little. Monique, however, reached out privately, acknowledging the shift with a simple message. You handled that well. I didn't reply at length. I knew the point had been made, and that was enough. Lydia eventually returned the ring, but the energy had irrevocably changed. What was once taken for granted, my attention, my loyalty, my patience, was no longer invisible. It had weight. It had boundaries. I thought often about why I chose to place the ring on Monique's finger. It wasn't malicious. It was intentional. It was a mirror for Lydia, reflecting her disregard, making her confront the reality she had created for herself. In quiet, controlled ways, sometimes the simplest gestures communicate the loudest messages. By the end of that week, dinner invitations became a different experience entirely. Lydia's behavior shifted, though not drastically. But I no longer waited for her to act. I acted in alignment with my values. The line had been drawn, not with anger, but with deliberate calmness. I had regained a sense of control over my life, over my choices, over my dignity. And that is what mattered. Not humiliation, not revenge. Clarity, dignity, and respect, both for myself and, in its own way, for Lydia. Sometimes a single action, subtle and precise, speaks louder than months of frustration or years of ignored boundaries. That night at dinner, with a wedding ring on Monique's finger, everything shifted. And in that shift, I finally understood the power of calm, calculated truth.